Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a fascinating stack of notes today.
Oh, yeah.
We are looking at a book that has, I mean, it's quietly become this sort of underground Bible for Silicon Valley.
Right.
But honestly, its reach has gone way, way beyond the tech world at this point.
Yeah.
It's the Almanack of Naval Ravikant.
This is one of those books that, you can read it in a couple of hours.
Yeah, it's sure.
But you end up thinking about it for, the next 2 years. It's so dense.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is pretty ambitious, I think. We aren't just summarizing a life story here.
No.
We are going to unpack two very specific, very bold claims that Naval makes. First, that getting rich is a skill, not luck, not magic, but a repeatable mechanical process.
And the second one is that happiness is also a skill you can learn.
Exactly. Just like learning to play the guitar or speaking a new language.
Which, that sounds almost contradictory to how we're usually raised, right?
Co-
We're taught that wealth is this mix of luck and privilege, and happiness is, genetic or based on your circumstances. Naval just flips the board on both.
He really does.
Yeah.
He claims that if he lost all his money today and you just dropped him in a random English-speaking country,
I remember this quote.
within 5 to 10 years, he'd be wealthy again because he knows the skill.
It's a massive claim.
It is. So before we get into the how, let's give a little more context on the who. For anyone listening who hasn't been, glued to tech Twitter for the last decade, who is Naval Ravikant?
So on paper, he's a tech legend. He founded AngelList, which totally changed how startups get funding. He was an early investor in Uber, Twitter, Postmates. The list just goes on and on. The resume is stacked.
Okay.
But the reason this book even exists isn't because of his bank account. It's because he's what people call a philosopher CEO.
Which, to be fair, can sometimes be a red flag.
Oh, for sure.
You hear philosopher CEO, and you kind of expect vague platitudes or someone trying to sell you a course.
Right. But Tim Ferriss, who wrote the foreword, makes a really critical distinction. He calls Naval a world-class operator.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means this isn't some academic in an ivory tower just theorizing. Naval actually built the companies, made the money, lost money, made it back, and then, and this is the key part, he spent time deconstructing how he did it. He thinks from first principles.
And the format of the book reflects that, doesn't it? It's not a memoir.
Not at all.
He didn't sit down and write chapter 1, I was born in.
No, the compiler, Eric Jordanson, he curated 10 years of tweets, podcast transcripts, and essays into these, dense, high-impact nuggets of thought.
It feels less like a narrative and more like an operating manual for a human brain.
Exactly. The goal was to remove the timestamp, strip away all the current events, and just leave the principles that would still be true in 50 years.
So let's get into it. We're going to try to solve two problems today. First, how to escape what he calls the competition trap and build wealth.
And then, how to not be miserable once you actually have the money.
Because apparently those are two very, very different skill sets.
Oh, they are. And the irony is that the skills you need to get rich, that drive, the anxiety, the dissatisfaction with how things are, those are usually the exact things that prevent you from being happy later. You have to learn how to turn the engine off.
Let's start with the wealth equation then. Naval draws this hard line between money and wealth. I think most of us use those words pretty much interchangeably. What's the difference for him?
Okay, so money is just the medium of exchange. It's how we transfer value. But wealth is the assets that earn while you sleep.
That's the critical distinction.
It's everything. If you have to be physically present to make money, you don't have wealth. You have a job.
And that leads right into his core critique of the standard career path. He says, and I'm quoting here, "You cannot get rich renting out your time."
This is the input-output trap. In a standard salary job, even a high-paying one like a doctor or a lawyer, your inputs are your hours, and they're tied one-to-one with your outputs, your pay.
So if you stop working,
the money stops. Exactly. Naval's point is you will never reach financial freedom that way because your time is limited. You can't work 24 hours a day.
so to break that link, you need equity. You have to own a piece of a business.
Correct. You need to own something that works for you. It could be stock, a patent, a piece of software. But getting there means understanding the game you're playing. And he says there are two games in society, the wealth game and the status game.
Okay, this part was really interesting to me because we usually think of wealthy people as having high status. Aren't they the same thing?
They can overlap, but the mechanics are completely opposite. Wealth creation is what they call a positive sum game.
Meaning?
Meaning, we can all win. If I create a new piece of software that saves you time, I've created value. I bake a bigger pie, you get a slice, I get a slice, everyone wins.
Okay, and status.
Status is zero sum. It's an old evolutionary game. He literally talks about monkey tribes ranking who is number one. For me to be number one, you must be number two.
It's a ranking system.
That's all it is. It doesn't create anything new, it just shuffles who's on top.
So when I buy a luxury car, not because I love the engineering, but because I want my neighbor to feel a little bit jealous.
You're playing a status game, and Naval warns that this is a trap. People playing status games turn vicious because the only way for them to go up is to push someone else down.
So his advice is just ignore them.
Completely. If you're busy creating wealth, creating actual value, you don't have time to worry about your rank. You're playing for freedom, not for applause.
Okay, so we need to ignore status, focus on owning equity.
Yeah.
But that's easier said than done, right? I can't just walk into a company and demand equity. This brings us to his productize yourself framework.
This is probably the most famous part of his whole philosophy. Productize yourself.
It sounds like a marketing buzzword.
It does, but it's really a formula. It breaks down into 3 parts: specific knowledge, accountability, and leverage.
Let's break these down because this is the toolkit. First up, specific knowledge. Is this just follow your passion?
Yeah.
Because we hear that all the time, and it's often terrible advice.
It's way more nuanced than that. Specific knowledge is knowledge that cannot be trained.
Wait, what?
If you can go to a university and get a degree in it, or if you can sign up for a boot camp to learn it, it's not specific knowledge.
So if you can't go to school for it, and you can't be trained for it,
Right.
how do you get it?
You get it by pursuing your genuine, authentic curiosity. It's the stuff you do naturally. The litmus test he gives is this: it feels like play to you, but looks like work to others.
Can you give me a concrete example of that?
Sure, think about someone like Joe Rogan.
Oh.
His specific knowledge is this weird combination of being an MMA commentator, a stand-up comedian, and having an obsessive curiosity about fringe science and big ideas.
Right. You can't go to college for that.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
no podcasting and MMA degree. That combination is totally unique to his life experience and his interests.
And because it's unique, there's no real competition.
That's the whole point. Authenticity lets you escape competition. If you're just doing accounting, you're competing with every other accountant. If you're doing you, no one can compete with you on being you.
Okay, so step 1 is figuring out what you're naturally obsessive about. Step 2 is accountability. Naval says, embrace accountability and take business risks under your own name.
This is the scary part.
It is.
In a big corporation, most people try to hide. They want to be part of the team, so if things go wrong, the blame is shared. Naval says do the opposite. You have to stand up and say, I am responsible for this.
But why would anyone do that? It feels like you're just inviting failure.
Because society rewards accountability. If things go right, the person who took the risk gets the reward, the equity. You can't get leverage if you aren't willing to put your neck on the line.
Is the cap going down with the ship, but also the captain getting the treasure?
Exactly. And that accountability gives you the ability to apply the third and most powerful component, leverage.
Leverage. The force multiplier. This explains how one person can create the output of, like, 1,000 people. He breaks this down into 3 types, right? Labor, capital.
And the new ones, code and media.
Okay.
So labor is the oldest form, having people work for you. Naval is actually pretty dismissive of this one. He says managing people is messy, it's difficult.
And we often just do it for status.
Yeah, to say, I have a team of 50 reporting to me. It impresses your parents, but it's a headache.
Then there's capital. Money.
That was the leverage of the 20th century. Think Warren Buffett. You use money to make more money. It scales beautifully, but there's a gatekeeper.
Right. You need someone to give you the money.
Or you need to spend decades saving it up.
But the real game changer is the third kind. Code and media. He calls this permissionless leverage.
That is the key word, permissionless. You don't need a boss's approval to write a Python script. You don't need a bank's permission to start a YouTube channel.
And the economics of this are just wild because of the marginal cost of replication.
Let's break that down. It means that making the first copy costs you time and effort. It took us time to prep and record this. But creating the second copy or the millionth copy costs basically zero.
It's an army of robots.
It is, literally. Data centers are full of servers, robots waiting for instructions. If you can code, you can command the robots. If you can't code, you can write or create media, which is just another way of digitizing your thoughts and replicating them infinitely.
So the formula is find the thing that feels like play to you, specific knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Take responsibility for it under your own name accountability.
Right.
And then use code or media to scale it to the moon leverage.
That's the engine of wealth. But Naval adds a massive warning here. In an age of infinite leverage, where one decision can be amplified 1,000,000 times, judgment becomes the most expensive skill.
Right. Because if you have a ton of leverage and you make a bad decision, you don't just crash your car, you crash the whole train.
Exactly. Hard work is overrated in the modern economy. It doesn't matter how hard you row if the boat is headed for a waterfall. Direction matters more than speed.
So how do we get this judgment? He offers some heuristics, some mental shortcuts for making better decisions.
Yeah, like play long-term games with long-term people. This is about compound interest. We get how it works for money, but he says it also applies to relationships and your reputation.
So if you screw someone over for a quick win,
You reset your compounding to 0. You want to be the person people trust implicitly. It removes all the friction.
I really liked his rule for when you're overwhelmed with choices, the no rule.
If you cannot decide, the answer is no.
Which is so tough because we have this massive FOMO. We want to keep all our options open.
But that's the problem. Our brains are wired for scarcity, but we live in an age of abundance. We want to grab every apple. Naval argues that if you aren't hell yes about something, you should say no.
Because saying yes to a mediocre thing.
It locks you up. It prevents you from saying yes to a great thing later. It's about protecting your time for the really high-impact stuff.
And when you do have to choose between two tough paths,
If you're evenly split, take the path that is more painful in the short term.
oof, that's the one nobody wants to hear. Why?
Because your brain is wired to avoid pain. This is conflict avoidance bias. Usually the path that requires a difficult conversation or a hard workout, that's the one with the long-term gain. He's saying you have to override that instinct.
Don't take the easy way out.
Right. And for learning judgment itself, he's not a fan of just reading the business book of the month.
No. He wants you to build a latticework of mental models.
You have to understand the absolute basics, but deeply. Microeconomics, game theory, evolution, basic math. These things don't change. If you understand supply and demand, you can understand almost any business.
Read what you love until you love to read. That's his advice on how to start.
Right. Don't force yourself to read boring books to look smart. Just build the habit. Start with comic books, whatever. You'll naturally graduate to harder stuff.
Okay, so let's say someone listening does all this. They productize themselves, use leverage, make good decisions, and now they're wealthy. They've solved the money problem. Now comes the curveball. Naval says, wealth solves your external problems, but it doesn't solve your internal ones.
And this is where the book just pivots from a business manual to like a philosophy text.
Yeah.
He argues that many wealthy people are actually incredibly unhappy because the very skill set that got them rich, being obsessed with the future, never being satisfied, always wanting more, is the enemy of peace.
So how does he define happiness? It's not joy or elation, is it?
No, those are just temporary emotions.
Sure.
He defines happiness as the absence of desire.
The absence of desire.
It's a default state. It's what's left over when you stop obsessing over what you don't have. When the chatter in your mind finally stops, what's left is happiness.
There's a quote in the book that I actually wrote down. I stuck it to my monitor. Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want.
It's brutal, isn't it? But it's true. Every time you say, I want that car, you are subconsciously saying, I am not enough until I have that car. You are choosing to be unhappy now for some potential payoff later.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If we drop all desire, don't we just become vegetables? If I'm perfectly happy sitting on the couch, why would I ever build a company or go to the gym?
That's the common pushback. And he acknowledges it. He's not saying have 0 desires ever. He's saying pick one. Choose one big desire. Maybe it's your startup, maybe it's getting fit, and go all in on that. Let go of the rest.
So don't be the person who's unhappy because they're not rich and not fit and their house isn't perfect.
Exactly. Pick your one battle.
And he says the biggest enemy of this piece is envy.
Envy is the ultimate status game emotion, and he has a tool to kill it. The SWOT test.
I love this test. It's so effective. Walk us through it.
Okay, so you see someone online, maybe a celebrity or an old classmate. They're beautiful, rich, traveling the world. You feel that pang of jealousy.
We all know the feeling.
The swap test asks, would you swap lives with them 100%?
Meaning, I can't just take their money and keep my own family.
No, you have to take everything. Their age, their physical aches and pains, their family trauma, their hidden anxieties, their nightmares, their dark secrets. You have to become them. And when you look at the full package, usually you realize,
Actually, I prefer my own set of problems.
exactly, it exposes that envy is just cherry-picking one highlight from someone else's life and ignoring the shadow. It makes the envy vanish.
So if happiness is a skill, what are the reps? How do we train it?
It's largely about taming the mind. He pushes meditation heavily, but specifically something called choiceless awareness.
Sounds fancy. What is it, practically?
It just means sitting down and watching your thoughts pass by like cars on a highway without judging them. You don't engage with the thought, you just see it. Oh, there's an angry thought. There's a planning thought. Eventually, your mind just gets bored and settles down.
He also talks about curating your environment, right? The 5 chimps theory.
This is pure biology. You can predict a chimp's behavior by looking at the 5 chimps it hangs out with. Humans are the same.
Moods are contagious.
Incredibly. If you hang out with anxious, cynical people, you will become anxious and cynical. Naval says you have to be ruthless about this. Surround yourself with happy, optimistic people.
That brings us to the final and maybe most liberating part of the whole book, the concept of saving yourself.
This is the cold water to the face moment. He says, doctors won't make you healthy. Nutritionists won't make you slim. Teachers won't make you smart. Mentors won't make you rich.
It sounds harsh. It sounds like he's saying nobody cares about you.
He's saying nobody can do the work for you. We're always looking for a savior, a guru, a course, a pill, a hack. But true change only happens when you take radical personal responsibility. You have to learn the knowledge yourself. You have to sit with your own thoughts.
He calls life a single-player game.
Which is a huge mental shift. Society tells us it's a multiplayer game competition, comparisons, keeping up with the Joneses. But biologically, you're born alone, you die alone, and every experience you have happens inside your own skull. Your interpretation of the world is your world.
So if I interpret a situation as a tragedy, it is one. If I see it as a lesson, it's a lesson. The event is the same, but my reality changes.
That's it. And that's why he calls meditation intermittent fasting for the mind. We're constantly force-feeding our brains with data, news, Instagram, emails. We are mentally obese. We need to stop eating the data and just let the mind digest.
He talked about barnacles, right?
Yes. Unresolved pain, regrets, fear, they stick to us like barnacles on a ship. If you never sit still, they just build up. Meditation lets them bubble up. It's painful at first.
That's why people hate sitting in a quiet room.
That's exactly why. But eventually they dissolve and you get back to that default state of peace.
We've covered a massive amount of ground here, from wealth as a function of equity and permissionless leverage,
Using code and media.
to happiness as the skill of dropping desires and just accepting the present.
It really is a complete operating system. Wealth buys you freedom. Freedom gives you the time to look inward. And looking inward brings you peace.
To wrap this all up, I want to leave the listener with what he calls the firefly perspective. It's a bit of memento mori, remembering death.
It is. He reminds us that on a cosmic scale, our lives are just the blink of a firefly in the night.
Right.
We think our problems are so huge, but the universe has been around for billions of years and will be around for billions more.
Which could be depressing. Nothing matters, we're all going to die.
But for Naval, it's the ultimate liberation. If you truly realize that you, your company, your failures, and your embarrassing moments will all be dust in a blink of an eye, you stop taking yourself so seriously.
It lets you actually play the game.
Right. You play the game because it's fun, not because you're desperate to win. You create art because you love it, not because you need to be immortalized.
That leads to my favorite definition in the entire book, his definition of retirement. It's not about turning 65.
No. He says, retirement is when you stop sacrificing today for an imaginary tomorrow. When today is complete, in and of itself, you're retired.
You can get there with $100 million, or you can get there by becoming a monk with 0 desires.
Or you can get there just by loving what you do so much that the money is just a side effect. The goal isn't the money. The goal is the present moment.
So, here is the question for you to mull over today. Are you sacrificing your today for a tomorrow that might not matter? And if you are, what's one contract, one desire you can drop right now to get a little bit of that freedom back? Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.